What happens when Hollywood royalty walks into what should be a friendly chat and finds herself in the crosshairs of daytime television's most unpredictable host? What you're about to witness isn't just another celebrity interview gone wrong. This is the story of how one of the most beloved actresses in cinema history reached her absolute breaking point on live television, creating one of the most explosive, unforgettable confrontations in talk show history. This is the moment Joy Behar pushed Julia Roberts too far. This is the moment America's sweetheart revealed the steel beneath the smile. And this is the moment that proved even the kindest souls have their limits. The morning started like any other taping of The View. Studio lights bathed the iconic set in their familiar warm glow as crew members made final adjustments to cameras and microphones. The audience filed in, their excitement palpable as they settled into their seats, programs clutched in eager hands. They knew Julia Roberts was scheduled to appear, and the anticipation in the room was electric. When Julia finally made her entrance, the response was thunderous. The audience rose to their feet as one, applause washing over the set like a wave. She looked radiant, her signature red hair catching the lights perfectly, her emerald dress flowing elegantly as she moved. That famous smile, the one that had launched 1,000 movie posters and melted 1,000,000 hearts, lit up her face as she waved to the cheering crowd. Whoopi Goldberg stood to greet her, arms open wide, her face showing genuine delight at having Julia back on the show. Sarah Haynes beamed from her seat, practically bouncing with enthusiasm. Sunny Hostin nodded appreciatively, clearly pleased to have such a legendary guest joining them. But Joy Behar sat differently. While the others radiated welcome and warmth, Joy leaned back in her chair with an expression that was harder to read. Her smile was there, certainly, but it didn't quite reach her eyes. There was something calculating in her gaze, something almost predatory in the way she watched Julia settle into her seat and adjust her dress. Those who knew Joy well, who had worked with her for years, recognized that look. It was the look of someone who had been planning something, waiting for their moment. "Julia Roberts, everybody," Whoopi announced, gesturing to their guest with genuine affection. "It is always such a joy to have you here with us. Welcome back." "Thank you so much for having me," Julia responded, her voice carrying that distinctive warmth that had become her trademark. "I love being here. The energy with you all is always so wonderful. And your audience," she gestured to the crowd, which erupted again. "They're just the best." The conversation began pleasantly enough. Sarah asked about Julia's latest project, a drama that had been generating significant awards buzz. Julia answered thoughtfully, sharing insights about her character's journey and the collaborative process with the director. She spoke with intelligence and passion about her craft, punctuating her responses with that infectious laugh that made everyone in the room smile along with her. Sunny followed up with questions about Julia's family, carefully respecting boundaries while still giving the audience glimpses into how the superstar balanced her legendary career with motherhood. Julia's face softened as she spoke about her children, her love for them evident in every word. The audience hung on every syllable, delighted by this intimate peek behind the curtain of Hollywood royalty. Throughout these exchanges, Joy remained unusually quiet. She didn't interrupt with her typical quips or observations. She simply watched Julia with that same intense focus, occasionally glancing down at the cards in her hands, a slight smile playing at the corners of her mouth. Little did Julia know, the trap was being carefully set. "You know, Julia," Joy finally interjected, her voice cutting through Sarah's follow-up question about Julia's upcoming projects. "I've been watching your career for a very long time now, and I have to ask you something." The temperature in the studio seemed to drop several degrees. Sarah stopped mid-sentence, her mouth still slightly open, surprise evident on her face. The audience, which had been so animated moments before, grew suddenly still. Julia turned to face Joy directly, that famous smile still in place but perhaps a bit more cautious now. "Of course, Joy, ask me anything." Joy leaned forward in her chair, and for just a moment, the predatory gleam in her eyes intensified. "Don't you ever get tired of playing the same character over and over again?" The question hung in the air like smoke after an explosion. You could feel the confusion rippling through the audience. Whoopi's expression shifted from pleasant host to something more guarded. Sarah and Sunny exchanged quick glances, an entire conversation passing between them in that fraction of a second. Julia's smile faltered just for a moment, just long enough for the cameras to catch it before she recovered with a small, uncertain laugh. "I'm not sure I understand what you mean. Joy, I've always tried to take on a variety of roles throughout my career." "Oh, come on," Joy pressed. And now there was no mistaking the edge in her voice. "The pretty woman, the romantic lead, The girl next door with the $1 million smile? It's the same thing. Julia, different movie, same character. Don't you think your audiences deserve more than that? Don't you think they deserve something real from someone with your supposed talent? The word supposed landed like a slap. Several audience members gasped audibly. Camera operators adjusted their positions, recognizing that something significant was unfolding. In the control room, producers were likely scrambling, uncertain whether to cut to commercial or let this play out. Whoopi shifted in her seat, clearly uncomfortable with the direction this was taking. Joy, I think that's a bit unfair. Julia has shown incredible range in her filmography. She's done drama, comedy, everything in between. I'm talking to Julia. Whoopi, Joy said, not even looking at her co-host. Her eyes remained locked on Julia. I want to hear what she has to say about this. Julia sat up straighter, and for the first time since taking her seat, that famous smile had completely vanished. When she spoke, her voice was measured, controlled, but there was steel underneath. I think my work speaks for itself. Joy. I've always tried to bring authenticity and truth to every role I take on. Authenticity, Joy repeated, and then she laughed, but it was a harsh, cutting sound that made several people in the studio wince. Is that what we're calling it? Because from where I'm sitting, it looks more like you've been playing the same version of yourself for 30 years. Julia Roberts, America's sweetheart, in her natural habitat. The atmosphere in the studio had shifted completely now. What had been a warm, welcoming space just minutes ago now felt tense, charged with an electricity that had nothing to do with excitement and everything to do with mounting discomfort. The other hosts looked genuinely worried, unsure how to intervene without making things worse. Sunny tried to redirect. Julia, why don't you tell us more about your upcoming... Actually, let's talk about something else. Joy interrupted again, her voice taking on an even more aggressive tone. Let's talk about privilege. Let's talk about how easy it is to maintain that perfect image when you've never had to face real adversity. Julia's eyes flashed with something dangerous, a warning sign that Joy either didn't see or chose to ignore. Excuse me. You heard me, Joy continued, seemingly emboldened by Julia's reaction. You've lived a charmed life, Julia, born beautiful, discovered young, handed success on a silver platter before you were old enough to truly understand it. What do you really know about struggle? What do you know about the real world that the rest of us actually live in? The audience was dead silent now. This had gone far beyond uncomfortable television. This was becoming something else entirely, something none of them had signed up to witness. People who had been smiling and laughing just minutes ago now sat with concerned expressions, some exchanging worried whispers with their neighbors. Julia took a deep breath, and everyone in the studio could see her fighting to maintain her composure. Her hands, which had been relaxed in her lap, were now gripping the armrests of her chair. Her knuckles had gone white. Joy, she said, her voice steady but with an underlying edge that hadn't been there before. I think you're making some very unfair assumptions about my life and my journey. You don't know anything about the challenges I've faced or the obstacles I've had to overcome. Don't I? Joy shot back immediately. Because from where I'm sitting, your biggest challenge has been choosing which mansion to live in or which luxury car to drive. Your hardest decision is probably which designer dress to wear to which premiere. Whoopi finally stepped in more forcefully, her voice carrying the authority of the show's moderator. Okay, Joy, I really think we need to... No, Whoopi, Joy interrupted, not even glancing in her direction. I think it's time someone asked the hard questions here. I think it's time someone called out this whole perfect princess act for what it really is, a carefully constructed lie designed to sell movie tickets and magazine covers. Julia's face had gone pale, but when she spoke, her voice remained controlled, though everyone could hear it beginning to strain. I have never pretended to be perfect. Joy. I've been very open about my mistakes, my failures, my growth as a person and as an artist. Have you, though, Joy challenged, leaning even further forward now, her entire body language aggressive? Or have you just fed the public the carefully sanitized, publicist-approved version of your life? When was the last time you showed us the real Julia Roberts? When was the last time you let anyone see past the manufactured product? The tension in the room was now so thick, it felt suffocating. Camera operators were practically holding their breath as they captured every moment of this unprecedented confrontation. Sound engineers monitored their equipment with unusual intensity, making sure not to miss a single word. Everyone in the studio understood they were witnessing something extraordinary, something that would be replayed and analyzed for years to come. I think there's been a fundamental misunderstanding here, Julia said, and now her voice was definitely showing signs of strain, a slight tremor entering her words. I came here today to talk about my work, to connect with your audience, to have a pleasant conversation. I didn't come here to be personally attacked. Joy leaned back in her chair with an expression of satisfaction, clearly enjoying the discomfort she was causing. Oh, is that what this is, an attack? I thought this was just honest conversation. Isn't that what talk shows are supposed to be about, honesty, real dialogue? There's a difference between honesty and cruelty. Joy, Julia replied, her composure finally beginning to crack in visible ways. Her eyes were bright with unshed tears, her voice wavering despite her efforts to keep it steady. There's a very clear difference between asking tough questions and deliberately trying to hurt someone. Hurt someone? Joy laughed again, that same harsh sound that was beginning to feel like nails on a chalkboard. Sweetie, if a few honest observations hurt your feelings, maybe you're not as strong as you pretend to be. Maybe that's the real problem here. The words landed like physical blows, and Julia's face flushed red. The entire studio seemed to hold its collective breath, waiting to see how America's sweetheart would respond to such a direct, personal insult delivered on live television in front of millions of viewers. Strong, Julia repeated slowly, her voice dropping to a dangerously quiet level that somehow carried more weight than if she'd been shouting. You want to talk about strength? Joy, let me tell you something about real strength. She paused, gathering herself, and when she continued, there was a new intensity in her voice that commanded absolute attention. Strength is sitting here and listening to you systematically tear me down for no reason other than your own personal entertainment. Strength is not responding to your cruelty with cruelty of my own, even though every instinct in my body is screaming at me to fight back. Joy's eyes lit up with malicious delight, and she actually smiled, a real, genuine smile of pleasure. Oh, now we're getting somewhere. There's that fire I knew was hiding underneath all that sweetness and light. Tell me, Julia, how does it really feel to finally drop the act? This isn't an act, Julia said, her voice rising slightly despite her obvious efforts to stay calm. This is me trying to maintain some dignity and professionalism in the face of your completely unprovoked hostility. Unprovoked, Joy scoffed, waving her hand dismissively. Everything I've said here today has been completely fair game. You're a public figure, sweetheart. You put yourself out there. You open yourself up to criticism. That's part of the deal you made when you took Hollywood's money. Sarah Haynes looked like she desperately wanted to crawl under the table and disappear. Her face was flushed with obvious embarrassment, and she kept glancing between Julia and Joy with an expression of pure horror. Maybe we should take a quick break, she suggested weakly, her voice barely above a whisper. No breaks, Joy declared firmly, as if she were the one running the show. We're just getting started here. Julia and I are having a real conversation for once, aren't we? Julia, no scripts, no publicists, no carefully rehearsed answers, just truth. She turned back to Julia with renewed energy, like a boxer who'd sensed weakness in an opponent. Let's talk about your marriages. 3 marriages, wasn't it? Or am I losing count? That's not exactly the fairy tale image you like to project in all those romantic comedies, is it? The audience gasped audibly, several people actually crying out in shock. This had crossed a line that even the most conflict-hungry viewers recognized as too far. Whoopi's face showed pure shock, her mouth falling open in disbelief. Joy, Whoopi said firmly, finding her voice through her surprise. That is completely inappropriate. That's way over the line. Is it? Joy challenged, turning to face Whoopi for the first time. She talks about love and relationships in every single interview. She makes movies about finding your soulmate and living happily ever after. But her personal track record tells a very different story. Doesn't it? I'm just pointing out the hypocrisy. Julia's hands were visibly trembling now. Whether from anger, hurt, or some combination of both was impossible to tell. But the trembling was unmistakable. Her breath was coming faster, her chest rising and falling with obvious emotion. My personal relationships, she said through gritted teeth, each word forced out with visible effort, are exactly that personal. They have nothing to do with why I'm here today. They have nothing to do with my work or my career. But they have everything to do with who you are. Joy pressed relentlessly, sensing blood in the water and going in for the kill. They show the gap between the image and the reality. They show that maybe, just maybe, you're not the relationship expert you pretend to be in all those romantic comedies that made you rich and famous. I have never ever pretended to be an expert on anything, Julia said, her voice tight with barely controlled emotion. I'm an actress. I play characters. I tell stories. That's my job. That's all it's ever been. Joy laughed that harsh, grating laugh again, and this time it seemed to echo in the uncomfortable silence of the studio. Right. You play characters. But the problem is, Julia, you never stop playing them. Do you, even now? Even here, sitting at this table, you're still performing. You're still playing the role of Julia Roberts, America's sweetheart. When do we get to meet the real person underneath all that acting? You want real? Julia's voice was shaking with barely controlled emotion now, all pretense of calm professionalism finally beginning to crumble. You want to see something real? Joy, this is real. This hurt you're causing right now. This embarrassment you're deliberately putting me through in front of millions of people, this is real. Good, Joy said with unmistakable satisfaction, actually nodding her approval. Finally, some honesty. Finally, some genuine emotion instead of that calculated, practiced charm you usually serve up. Sunny Hostin looked absolutely appalled, her face a mask of disbelief and disgust. Joy, I honestly don't understand what you're trying to accomplish here. Julia is our guest. She came here in good faith. Our guest who's been lying to the public for decades, Joy shot back, cutting her off mid-sentence. Our guest who's built an entire career on being fake, on selling an image that has nothing to do with reality. Fake! Julia's voice cracked on the word, and a single tear finally escaped, rolling down her cheek before she could stop it. You think I'm fake? You think everything I've worked for, everything I've achieved, every role I've poured my heart into, you think it's all fake? I think you're a product, Joy said coldly, her voice devoid of warmth or compassion. I think you're a carefully manufactured brand designed to sell movie tickets and magazine covers and keep the Hollywood machine running. I think the real Julia Roberts, whoever that person actually is, got lost somewhere along the way probably decades ago. The cruelty in Joy's voice was unmistakable now, undeniable even to those who might have wanted to give her the benefit of the doubt. Even the camera operators looked uncomfortable, shifting their weight from foot to foot, uncertain whether they should continue filming or look away. In the control room, producers were likely having heated debates about whether to cut the feed, pull to commercial, do something, anything to stop this train wreck in progress. Julia stared at Joy for a long, charged moment. More tears were forming in her eyes, threatening to fall, but she held Joy's gaze with remarkable steadiness. When she finally spoke, her voice was quiet but carried absolute conviction. You know what, Joy? You're right about one thing. There is a real Julia Roberts underneath all of this, underneath the fame and the image and all the baggage that comes with being in the public eye for 30 years. She paused, taking a shaky breath, and everyone in the studio leaned forward unconsciously, riveted by what she might say next. And that real person is telling me, very clearly, very loudly, that I don't have to sit here and listen to this abuse. That real person is telling me that I deserve better than this, that nobody deserves this. Abuse. Joy mocked, her voice dripping with disdain. Asking tough questions is abuse now. Having an honest conversation is abuse. My God, you really are as fragile as I thought. No, Julia said, standing up from her chair with deliberate, controlled movements, but deliberately trying to humiliate someone, deliberately trying to make them feel small and worthless for your own entertainment, that's abuse. And I won't tolerate it. Not from you, not from anyone. The sound of Julia's chair scraping against the floor seemed unnaturally loud in the tense silence of the studio. Every eye was locked on her as she stood there, tall and dignified despite the tears on her face, despite the obvious hurt in her eyes. Joy's expression changed slightly, a flicker of something surprise, concern, realization crossing her face, as if she was just beginning to understand that she might have pushed too far. Oh, come on, Julia. Don't be so dramatic. Sit down. We're just having a conversation here. This isn't a conversation, Julia said firmly, her voice stronger now, powered by righteous anger and wounded dignity. This is a character assassination. This is you using your platform, your microphone, your audience to bully someone, and I refuse to participate in it any longer. The other hosts looked panicked now. Whoopi stood up as well, her hands raised in a placating gesture. Julia, please, please don't leave. We can work this out. We can... No, Whoopi! Julia interrupted gently but firmly. We can't work this out. Some things can't be fixed with apologies or explanations. Some things are just wrong. And this, she gestured at Joy, this is wrong. Joy, perhaps sensing that she was genuinely losing control of the situation, that her guest was actually preparing to walk off the set, tried a different approach. Her voice softened slightly, though the insincerity was obvious. Look, Julia, if I hurt your feelings, that honestly wasn't my intention. I was just trying to have a real, honest discussion. Your intention, Julia turned to face Joy directly, and the pain in her eyes was now evident to everyone in the studio, broadcast in high definition to millions of viewers at home. Joy, everything about this has been intentional. Every question, every insult, Every attempt to make me look foolish or fake or like some kind of manufactured product, it's all been intentional. She began reaching for her microphone, her fingers working at the small clip that attached it to her dress. You came into this with an agenda, and that agenda was to tear me down, to take someone the audience loves and destroy them for entertainment value. That's not true, Joy protested, but her voice lacked conviction, and everyone in the room could hear it. Isn't it? Julia challenged, still working on removing her microphone. Then explain to me why every single thing you've said to me has been designed to hurt. Explain to me why you've ignored every attempt the other hosts have made to steer this conversation in a more positive direction. Explain to me why you seem to be actively enjoying my discomfort. Joy fell silent, her mouth opening and closing like a fish out of water, unable to find words that would justify her behavior. The studio audience was completely quiet, barely breathing, transfixed by this unprecedented confrontation playing out before their eyes. I'm a journalist, Joy finally said weakly, grasping at straws. It's my job to ask hard questions, to push back, to dig deeper. No, Julia said with quiet, devastating intensity. You're not being a journalist right now. Joy. Journalists seek truth. Journalists inform their audiences. Journalists maintain some level of professionalism and respect, even when asking difficult questions. She paused, her microphone now completely unclipped, dangling from her hand. You're not being a journalist. You're being a bully. And I've spent too many years of my life dealing with bullies in school, in Hollywood, in the media to sit here and let you continue. The word bully seemed to hit Joy like a physical blow. Her face flushed deep red, and for the first time since the interview began, she looked genuinely rattled. Her hands gripped the edge of the table, and her jaw worked silently for several seconds before she could form words. I am not a bully, Joy said, her voice defensive and angry, with an undercurrent of something that might have been fear. I've been doing this job for years. I've interviewed hundreds of celebrities, politicians, public figures. Nobody has ever called me a bully. Then maybe it's time someone told you the truth, Julia replied, her voice steady despite the tears that were still threatening to fall. Maybe it's time someone pointed out that there's a difference between being provocative and being cruel, between challenging your guests and trying to destroy them. The studio remained in absolute, dead silence. The tension was so thick it felt like a physical presence in the room, pressing down on everyone, making it hard to breathe. Camera operators stood frozen at their stations, afraid to move, afraid to miss a single second of this historic moment. You want to talk about cruel? Joy's voice rose sharply, her anger now fully visible. Let's talk about how cruel it is to lie to millions of people. Let's talk about how cruel it is to present yourself as something you're not, to sell a fantasy that doesn't exist, to give people false hope about love and happiness and what exactly am I pretending to be? Julia demanded, her voice cutting through Joy's rant. What terrible lie am I telling by trying to bring joy, by trying to bring some light into people's lives through my work? You're pretending to be perfect, Joy exploded, standing up now as well, her chair rolling backward with the force of her movement. You're pretending to have all the answers, to be this beacon of light and happiness when real people are struggling with real problems every single day. Julia shook her head slowly, her expression one of disbelief mixed with profound sadness. I have never claimed to be perfect. I have never claimed to have all the answers. All I've ever tried to do is my job, which is to entertain people, to tell stories, to maybe make them smile or cry or feel something for a couple of hours. But that's exactly the problem, Joy pressed on, seemingly unable to stop herself now, words pouring out in a torrent. You make it look so easy. You make it seem like happiness is just a choice, like success is just about having a pretty smile and a positive attitude. And that's a lie. That's a dangerous, harmful lie. And that bothers you, Julia asked, and there was genuine confusion in her voice now, cutting through the anger and hurt. The fact that I try to stay positive, that I try to see the good in life, that bothers you? It bothers me because it's not real, Joy nearly shouted, her voice echoing in the studio. Life isn't a romantic comedy. Julia, life is hard and messy and disappointing. And when you go around pretending otherwise, when you sell that fantasy to millions of people, you're doing them a disservice. You're lying to them. The other hosts sat frozen in their seats, watching this intensely personal confrontation unfold with expressions of shock and horror. Whoopi looked like she was frantically trying to figure out how to end this without making things even worse. Sarah had her hand pressed to her mouth, eyes wide. Sunny appeared genuinely disturbed by what she was witnessing, her usual composure completely shattered. Julia was quiet for a long moment, and everyone in the studio watched as emotions played across her famous face, hurt, anger, confusion, and finally something that looked almost like pity. When she spoke again, her voice was soft but filled with a strength that hadn't been there at the beginning of this interview. You know what? Joy. You're right about one thing. Life is hard. Life is messy. Life is full of disappointment and pain and heartbreak. Joy looked surprised by this admission, as if she hadn't expected Julia to agree with anything she'd said. She opened her mouth to respond, but Julia held up a hand, stopping her. But you know what else life is, Julia continued, her voice growing stronger with each word. Life is also beautiful. Life is full of moments of pure joy and love and wonder. Life is full of kindness and connection and hope. And if my work, if my so-called fake positivity helps even one person remember that, helps even one person get through a difficult day, then I'm proud of what I do. I'm proud of every role I've ever played. That's just naive, Joy muttered, but she sounded less certain now, some of the fire gone from her voice. No, Julia said firmly, with absolute conviction. What's naive is thinking that tearing other people down makes you more authentic. What's naive is believing that cynicism is somehow more honest than hope. What's naive is thinking that cruelty is a substitute for truth. Joy's face was getting redder by the minute, her breathing heavy and labored. Don't you dare lecture me about authenticity. Don't you dare stand there and act like you're somehow better than me. I'm not acting like I'm better than anyone, Julia said, beginning to gather her belongings, her purse, the water bottle that had been provided for her. But I am choosing not to participate in whatever this has become. I am choosing to remove myself from this toxic situation. What this is, Joy said venomously, her voice dripping with contempt, is reality. This is what happens when someone finally calls you out on your act. This is what happens when someone refuses to play along with your little game. Julia paused in gathering her things and looked directly at Joy, really looked at her, and what Joy saw in those famous eyes made her take an involuntary step backward. You want to know what reality is? Joy. Julia's voice was quiet but somehow filled the entire studio. Reality is that you've just spent the last 20 minutes trying to destroy someone for no reason other than your own personal satisfaction. Reality is that you've used your platform, this show, this audience, these cameras not to inform or entertain or inspire, but specifically to hurt. I was doing my job, Joy insisted, but her voice was beginning to crack, the certainty draining away. Your job is to interview guests, not to attack them, Julia said, each word precisely articulated. Your job is to create engaging television, not to humiliate people who were kind enough to come on your show. Your job is to connect with viewers, not to demonstrate how cruel you can be to someone who can't really fight back without looking bad themselves. Whoopi finally found her voice again, stepping forward with her hands raised. Julia, please, let's all just take a step back here. Maybe if we all calm down, we can… No, Whoopi, Julia interrupted, but her tone was gentle, respectful. Some things can't be fixed. Some behaviors can't be excused or smoothed over. I came here today in good faith, expecting to have a pleasant conversation about my work and my life. Instead, I was ambushed by someone who seems to take actual pleasure in other people's pain. Joy stood up abruptly if she hadn't been already fully standing, her entire body rigid with anger and what might have been embarrassment. You know what? Fine. Leave. Walk away. That's what people like you do when things get uncomfortable, isn't it? That's what privileged Hollywood royalty does when they don't get the softball treatment they expect. Julia turned back to face Joy one final time, and there was something almost sad in her expression. Not sadness for herself, but sadness for Joy, for what this moment revealed about both of them. No, Joy, she said quietly. People like me choose not to engage with cruelty. People like me choose not to reward bad behavior with our presence. People like me understand that sometimes the strongest thing you can do is walk away with your dignity intact. Bad behavior! Joy was almost shouting now, her voice reaching a pitch that made several audience members wince. I was asking legitimate questions about a public figure who makes millions of dollars pretending to be America's sweetheart. I was doing what journalists are supposed to do. And there it is, Julia said softly, almost to herself. You said it yourself. Joy, you think I'm pretending. You think everything about me is an act, a performance, a lie. And maybe that says more about you than it does about me. Maybe that reveals something about how you see the world, about what you believe people are capable of. Joy's mouth opened and closed several times, words failing her completely. Her face was still flushed red, her hands trembling slightly at her sides. The studio audience remained utterly silent, riveted by this unprecedented display of raw emotion and conflict playing out before their eyes. Julia began walking toward the edge of the set, Her microphone clutched in one hand, her purse in the other. Her posture was straight, her head held high despite the tears that had left tracks down her cheeks. She moved with grace and dignity, every inch the movie star, but also something more, something genuine and human and hurt. "For what it's worth, Joy," Julia said, pausing at the edge of the set but not turning around. "I hope someday you figure out why you felt the need to do this. I hope you figure out what you were really trying to accomplish here, because I don't think it was about me at all." "Don't you walk away from me," Joy called after her, and there was desperation in her voice now, mingling with the anger. "We're not finished here. You don't get to just leave." Julia paused, took a deep breath, and finally turned back one last time. The cameras captured her face in perfect clarity. The tears, the hurt, but also the strength, the resolve, the quiet dignity that no amount of cruel questioning could strip away. "Yes, Joy," she said simply, her voice clear and strong. "We are finished. We are very, very much finished." And with those final words, Julia Roberts walked off the View set, leaving behind a stunned studio audience, a panel of shell-shocked hosts, and one very angry, very flustered Joy Behar, who stood at the table breathing heavily, her hands gripping the edge as if it were the only thing keeping her upright. The moment stretched out, seeming to last forever. Joy continued to stand there, looking like she couldn't quite believe what had just happened, couldn't quite process that a guest had actually walked off her show, had actually refused to continue being attacked. The reality of the situation was slowly sinking in, visible in the way her expression shifted from anger to confusion to something that might have been the first stirrings of regret. The cameras continued rolling, capturing every second of this historic moment. In the control room, producers were likely in complete chaos, trying to decide what to do, how to handle this unprecedented situation. On set, the other hosts remained frozen, afraid to move, afraid to speak, afraid to do anything that might make this already disastrous situation worse. Finally, after what felt like an eternity but was probably only 15 or 20 seconds, Whoopi cleared her throat. She looked directly into the camera, and her face showed the strain of trying to maintain professionalism in the wake of what had just occurred. "We're going to take a break," she said, her voice lacking its usual warmth and confidence. "We'll be right back." But they wouldn't be right back. Not really. Because something had broken in that studio. Something fundamental about the implicit contract between hosts and guests, between entertainers and audience. The damage had been done, and everyone in that studio knew they had just witnessed something that would be talked about, analyzed, and debated for years to come. As the show cut to commercial, the audience remained in their seats, buzzing with excitement and disbelief and shock at what they had just witnessed. They had come expecting a typical celebrity interview, some laughs, some insights into Julia Roberts' life and career, maybe a clip from her new movie. Instead, they had seen one of the most dramatic, uncomfortable, and genuinely real confrontations in daytime television history. They had seen America's sweetheart reveal the steel beneath the smile. They had seen kindness reach its breaking point. They had seen what happens when someone pushes too far, crosses too many lines, mistakes genuine grace for weakness. What started as a routine celebrity interview had become something else entirely, a moment of truth, a line in the sand, a demonstration that even the most patient, kind, and professional people have their limits. And Joy Behar had found Julia Roberts' limit, had pushed past it, and was now left to face the consequences of her actions in front of millions of viewers. The question that lingered in that studio, that hung in the air even after the cameras stopped rolling, was simple but profound. Was Joy right to push so hard? Did Julia overreact? Or was this exactly what should happen when kindness is mistaken for weakness? When hospitality is repaid with hostility? When a guest is treated not as a person but as a target? Whatever the answer, one thing was certain: nobody who witnessed that moment would ever forget it.